Hello and welcome to the Imagineer Podcast, your unofficial guide to all things Disney. I'm your host, Matthew Kroll, and you're listening to episode 119 of the Imagineer Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing a fascinating topic, which is the Imagineering of Disney Springs. I know when we think about Imagineering, we often gravitate towards and think of those e-ticket attractions, those big thrill rides and game changers in the theme park landscape, perhaps even some of the best shows at the Disney parks. We don't often think about places, and especially shopping, but it's incredible the amount of detail and the theming that goes into a shopping district at Disney, and what it took to transform downtown Disney into Disney Springs. Of course, to fully discuss this topic, I had to bring a guest onto the show who knows a thing or two about Disney Springs, so I invited back veteran Walt Disney Imagineer Theron Skees, who was the lead Imagineer on Disney Springs. It is incredible what I learned from chatting with him, the amount of detail that went into Disney Springs, the complexity that it took to bring this project to life, and the sheer Imagineering that went into this shopping district is extraordinary. It's incredible that so much time and attention went into this project, and I cannot wait for you to hear some of this incredible Imagineering that went into this really incredible place at Walt Disney World. I know that I came out of the conversation having an even greater appreciation for Disney Springs, and I anticipate you will as well. So in this episode, I get the chance to chat with Theron about the Imagineering of Disney Springs and some of the details that will want you to go back and explore this shopping district at Walt Disney World. Before we get started, I do want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, WDW Magazine. You can learn more and subscribe to their print or digital editions by clicking on the link in the show notes of this episode or heading to ImagineerPodcast.com. At the end of the episode, I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about how you can connect with the Imagineer Podcast on all your favorite social media channels and how you can help to inspire and create the future of this show. So, grab some headphones, pull up your favorite armchair, and enjoy this episode of the Imagineer Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Instagram Live discussion about Disney Springs. This is going to be what I think is going to be a really fun discussion. We've done this series before, chatting with an Imagineer about Disney Springs, or about a wide range of different topics. In today's episode, we are going to be talking specifically about Disney Springs with the lead Imagineer, Theron Skees, who worked on Disney Springs. He and I have chatted before about this project in some detail. There are so many stories, and this is what has amazed me about talking about a subject like Disney Springs, is you wouldn't think for a shopping district there would be so much Imagineering that goes into it. Of course, us Disney fans know what goes into any project at Disney, but I was still amazed and continue to be amazed by Theron's stories about Disney Springs because there's so much that went into it, and we're going to chat with him. I think you're going to have a newfound appreciation after this discussion about Disney Springs. I know I already have, and the last time I visited, I was so impressed and looking for all these details and hidden Easter eggs and storytelling, and it's incredible what Disney does to Imagineer, even, again, a shopping district like Disney Springs. So, without further ado, let me go ahead and invite Theron into the room, and we'll kick off this really amazing discussion. I'll give Theron, of course, the opportunity once again to introduce himself and to share a little bit more about what he does and how he worked with Disney. So, Theron, welcome back to the show.
So great to be back, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on to the show again. This is our third Instagram Live. We've done a general Q&A. We did an episode about Tower of Terror, and now we're doing a discussion about Disney Springs. And this one, I have to say, Tower of Terror set the bar very high, but I have, I think, even more excitement for this topic because I have to admit, as a Disney fan, and as an Imagineering geek, I know a lot about Tower of Terror. I still learned a ton from you. I'm not going to lie. There were so many stories I didn't know. But I don't know that much about Disney Springs, except for going there and understanding the layout and the shops and some of the general storytelling. But let's start things off by, first of all, discussing what your role was on the Disney Springs project. That's probably the best place to start.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I'm really excited to talk about these topics, and hopefully all of your audiences submitted some great questions because that's the most fun of all.
They have.
So my role was as executive creative director for the project, and basically that just means the overall creative lead for the project. And it was quite a big challenge creatively, and we can get into this more, because it wasn't as simple as, not that an attraction is simple, but it wasn't as straightforward. We had to, in a sense, really create a whole new creative development pathway to even get started. So that in itself was a really awesome place to be. Scary, but really awesome because it was brand new. We hadn't really done it on this scale for the company before.
That makes sense. And it provides you with a great perspective and overview for this project. There were, I have to say, a lot of great questions submitted, so we're going to get to a lot of them. For any of you watching on Instagram Live, though, who are here watching with us live, definitely submit your questions in the comments. You can add them to the question sticker, so if you didn't get the chance to submit it previously, please feel free to do so. We're reading the comments directly. We're going to respond to everything that we possibly can. But let me go into the question sticker because, like I said, there was a lot that was here that I thought was really worth discussing. And I want to start with the inspiration. What was the inspiration behind the refurb? Because everybody knows it used to be downtown Disney and it was a really popular place to go. We had Pleasure Island, we had the West Side, we had the Marketplace, and now it's totally different. So what was the inspiration or the motivation to change it to Disney Springs?
Sure. Well, maybe I should go just a little bit into the Wayback Machine just to set the context.
Yes,
because
let's do it.
there's so many new people that have moved to Orlando, or actually new visitors that maybe never went to downtown Disney before. So just contextually, downtown Disney consisted of 3 districts, you could call. You mentioned Pleasure Island. The other one was West Side, but it all started with the Disney Village in the 1970s. Then in the 80s, as you said, it went to Pleasure Island. 90s, it went to the West Side. Now, one thing to really keep in mind is, unlike a theme park, these 3 districts were really separate. They were completely separate. The infrastructure, the cabling, the drainage, all of that, as well as story-wise, they were 3 separate experiences. In fact, to get from the Disney Village to get over to the West Side, if you remember, you had to walk it like in the parking lot, in the sidewalk around. If you didn't want to pay to walk through Pleasure Island because it was a ticketed venue, you had to kind of walk around it. So with that as context, that was our first kind of solution, our thing that we had to solve is that's not what Disney fans are really used to, right? Disney fans and people who visit, even for the first time, what they discover is that Disney's great at creating a place. And that place has a feeling, it has a belonging, it has a time period, characters that live there, it has a history, and you can feel that when you walk into it. And downtown Disney just didn't. It was very separate. The other thing that was a big business driver for it at the time was that Orlando really built up in the time since the Disney Village certainly was done in the 70s. That was built actually because there was really no shopping out at Walt Disney World property at all, and then slowly kind of gained over time. Well, Orlando got sophisticated. They got nightclubs. They had cool venues to go to. You had the Florida Mall, you had the Millennial Mall, which is very high end. And frankly, the Disney company, Walt Disney World, was seeing big tour buses that would show up on property. Guests who were staying at Walt Disney World would load into these buses, drive off property to go shopping, and come back. So, it didn't take an MBA to figure out that, you had to do something different. So that's the context for why we did that. And it was just happened to be at a point in time when the Disney company had really great leadership that could see that need and really invested the right amount of money to do it right.
And it makes sense. I remember Downtown Disney well, and it was very piecemeal. There was not a collective story to tie Disney Springs together. So, and you're right. I remember we typically, as a very Disney family, if we were going to go shopping when we were at Walt Disney World, we were not leaving Walt Disney World property. We went to Downtown Disney to go shopping, but as a local, I rarely went shopping at Downtown Disney. I went to the mall at Millennia, like you mentioned, or maybe the Orlando Mall. And then when the Disney Springs refurb happened, all of a sudden it became, even as a local, it made more sense to now go to Disney Springs, because not only were you getting the shopping, but you're also now in this place that feels Disney, which I know that's one of the things we're gonna talk about as well. So I thought that was interesting. We should this comes with a frowny face, which people can't see who are listening to the podcast, but I think it's worth mentioning. Why change the name? Because I think this is something that is always a very controversial decision, right? Disney MGM Studios became Disney's Hollywood Studios, and there are shirts that say it's always going to be MGM to me. But it's at what point do you make the decision to not only change the story but also change the name that goes with the story?
That's a fantastic question, actually, and I think Disney Springs has the probably the best reason for doing it, and that is, if you were to look across Walt Disney World property, there were times that you'd see signs for Pleasure Island, or you'd see signs that said West Side, or signs that said Disney Village, and then there were signs that said Downtown Disney. And I think over time it got really confusing for guests. Like, where are we going? It's Downtown Disney, and that's just Pleasure Island, right? No. Pleasure Island it became so convoluted, unfortunately, that was another real justification for creating a single place with a single name and an identity and story and feeling that was authentic, that was connected, and so that in this case, the name really did make sense because it was talking about, this town. And we can talk about it. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I mean, the name itself was quite literally taken after the town itself. So we were creating a real place that was a real town before. And so I think that was the only way to go, is to name it one thing.
Well, that did prompt a question that you really teed me up, because, look, I got this right here. What is the story behind Disney Springs? It was one of the topics I wanted to make sure to mention, because not a lot of people know. I think you can, and like any Imagineering project, you can see something and it can just click and make sense, and you almost don't need to know the formal story to get it, but it always is helpful or insightful. And certainly as a fan, it brings me a lot of excitement to be able to share, well, here are why the details are like this, and here's the story. So what is the story behind Disney Springs?
This I think, to me, is a great question, and I really enjoy answering this because, and I lecture and teach on this a lot, that story, of course, is narrative, right? And if you ask your anyone who's joining the live event right now what their favorite book or movie is, they could tell you, and they could really tell you about the story because it made an emotional connection with them and they remembered it. The characters resonated, the theme, triumph over evil or whatever, hero's journey, all of those things resonate. So to use that power of story narrative in a dimensional physical place is the best thing to do, right? That's the best, because unlike movies, books, and games, when a themed environment is a physical place that you walk into. So you have to have a narrative. However, there's one difference, and I think that this is true with Imagineering and certainly true in the themed entertainment industry, and that is that story actually drives business. And in this case of Disney Springs, it really is the case. So if you go back to what I just said contextually about how diverse and how kind of broken up, dispersed, if you will, the story was. Even the names were confusing. You'd have signs. I mean, think about this. If you put a sign in Crossroads where the Hotel Plaza Boulevard is, what do you say? Downtown Disney? Do you say West Side? Do you say go to Planet Hollywood at West Side at Downtown Disney? Right? It could get very, very confusing. So it also was a huge challenge from an Imagineering design perspective. How do we take these three very diverse districts? We can't bulldoze everything. We have to keep these things open. And some of this stuff is old, right? Even the retail standards of storefronts and stuff in the Disney Village side that was built in the 70s, those standards are completely... We don't do that anymore, right? If you're in any kind of modern retail, you have 40-foot storefronts, all this stuff. So how do we make all this together? Plus, how do we add over 1 million square feet with brand new buildings, brand new retailers? How does it feel right? So it took months to really figure out the story. And in this case, the story is the thing that bound together the brand, the audience, and the business objectives. That's really what I teach. Those three elements, story encapsulates that, sets a vision for what the project will do, and then everybody aligns to that. And in this case, it's the best case study because this is really what we did here. And when we hit on the fact that this was a town, then it gave us the excuse, if you will, to use the older buildings and to design along a time period as if the town grew naturally. And it just all fit together perfectly.
So that makes sense. So the town name is actually then Disney Springs. Is that's what I'm kind of piecing together here?
Yes. Well, the original town was called The Springs. That was just a simple name that we gave it.
Oh, that makes more sense. Yeah.
and we had a whole background as to how it got started and everything. And I'll just give you one little piece of the story here that I think is really cool because we had a lot of fiction in our background story. But the one fact in the background story is that Walt's parents were actually married just outside of Orlando in a little town called Kismet. In fact, it doesn't even exist anymore. So we kind of dreamed that around the dinner table, Walt's parents talked about their visit to Florida, honeymooning, in Florida, and how beautiful and natural it was. So when it came time for Walt to purchase property for his East Coast project, the Florida project, of course he went back and looked at Central Florida based on all of the discussions that they had around the dinner table. And when he purchased all that land, The Springs as a little town was a part of that purchase. And then, so building it out with the parking garages and everything modern that's there was just a part of the Disney development, but we still always honored where it started with The Springs, right? That was kind of our storyline in a nutshell.
That's so cool. I love that it involves Walt. It kind of ties together reality and fiction, and it's a work of it's almost like fan fiction. It's taking an existing property, which in this case is actually reality, and changing things slightly and then creating a story around it. So I think that's actually very cool. And I didn't know about that Walt connection, so that gives me even now a greater appreciation for Disney Springs as a whole.
All of us as fans get our hearts start glowing when it ties back to, especially Walt and his family, and that bit of truth is really cool. In fact, when we pitched the idea to Diane Disney before she passed away, actually it was I think about 2 or 3 months before she passed away, I had the incredible opportunity to present to her at the Disney Family Museum, in line with some other stuff that we were presenting to her, and it was like career highlight where she said, "Wow, my dad would just love this." And I was just like, "All right,
wow,
die now." This was incredible.
That would be an incredible compliment to get from a member of the Disney family, Walt's own daughter. I mean, that's got to be incredible right there. We're going to talk about project development, and in particular this project, because there are so many pieces that go into a place like this. It's almost the scale of a theme park. I think this is a good question because it's asking about decision makers, and especially when it comes to something massive like this, how many decision makers are involved for a vision, and I guess a sort of extension of this is the execution, or another way to think about it is how is a project like this structured in terms of the decision makers?
Sure. Well, I think if anybody that's listening either has experience with it or not, one thing that's probably pretty obvious is a legacy brand company like Disney or Universal or even Merlin to entertainment to a large degree. Those companies invest hundreds of millions or sometimes billions of dollars, and they don't even see a return on that investment for sometimes 3 or even 5 years before they make a dime back on it. There's just not a lot of companies in the world that can do that. So I only say that not to, ring the bell about how much money, but to say that when you have that much money on the line, you end up with a lot of help on your projects, right? You end up with a lot of people who really have a vested interest. They are responsible for that money. So you have a lot of corporate oversight and you have a lot of project oversight. So from an Imagineering perspective, controls and finance and risk mitigation and the creative has got to be, absolutely innovative. So you have a lot on a regular project, on a Tower of Terror, on a Pandora, I would call that a regular project. That's something we do quite a lot of. Even with the innovations, it's an attraction, it's a land. That's something we're very familiar with. On something like a Disney Springs, where there were quite a few even senior players in the company that really didn't know what it was. Is it a mall? Is it a shopping center? Is it a theme park? We're just not quite sure, even until up to the point, scary as that may sound, that we delivered, there was quite a few people in the organization that didn't really understand where we were going. And then when we did deliver it, they were like, oh, wow, that's amazing. So think about that. With the Disney company, we had all that support, but we also had over 100 tenants. And those tenants invested close to $300 million total, maybe more. And with all of their spaces, the restaurants built all their spaces, all of the retailers and everything came in. So each one of them had their own CEO, their own project manager, their own finance group, their own architects. They had their own builders. So it was not like a theme park or a hotel project where Disney was running the job, Imagineering was on site running the job. You had a contractor, you had an architect, you had a ride design firm, and some other specialists, and that was kind of it. You kind of control your own destiny. This project was not that at all. You had over 100 of those scenarios, right? And they were all going at different paces and different times, and people were always changing. So it was enormously complex project with so many different wheels spinning, and we had the Walt Disney World government group, which is called Reedy Creek. We had, of course, they were involved in doing all the building permits and roadway inspections and garages, and it was unbelievable. So we had a government entity that sat in on literally every meeting. So yeah, uber complex.
To say the least. I'm glad you brought up the idea of the tenants, because that is a rare part of a project at Disney to have. In most cases, the decision makers are mostly those within the Walt Disney Company. It's private property. It's a, unless there's a licensing part of it, it's really all about the Disney experience. But here, you have to get all of these tenants to agree to the plan. And I can only imagine that I'm trying to think of who's there. If you have like Coach, for instance, they might have a different opinion than the Coca-Cola store that's there. And those are, two different people two different companies that had to agree. So how do you get 100 different restaurants, brands, how do you get everybody to agree on and sign off on the story? Because that almost seems like literally impossible. I can sometimes even in my day job get like 10 people to agree to something, but you have 100 separate organizations. How do you do that?
It was a 5-ring circus. It really was. It was constantly moving. One of the other big differences between kind of the more regular type of projects that an Imagineering or that a Disney would do, even as super complex as a whole theme park is, and that's really complex. You're dealing with a foreign government like a Shanghai or a Paris or Hong Kong, for example. There's and foreign companies. I mean, there's a lot of challenges there. But if you bring that domestic and you just go to Walt Disney World and you're talking about an attraction or even a land, it's pretty much the Disney company dictating what we're going to build and how that's going to work out. In the case of Pandora, you have, Jim Cameron and Lightship Entertainment, and that's a big deal. You got to work together, but it's nothing like 100 different brands, and trying to keep all of those, everybody happy, right? So one of the bigger challenges, and which was very different from any other project that we'd done, is we had to have a lot of design work done up front. In fact, the entire model room, we'd build this big presentation center with, I don't know, maybe some of your audience members have seen this, with the really cool magic model changing.
I think there's a video on YouTube that shows it, and with the announcement of Disney Springs. But yeah, I haven't seen it in person, but even on video, it looked amazing.
It was really cool. That was my idea to bring together Imagineers. It was one of the first times we ever pulled that off, and we had a group of really, really cool Imagineers that were painting with light. So they were painting on the physical model with light, even down to 1 pixel. So the street lamps, they did 1 pixel of light on each street lamp. Very, very cool stuff. Hadn't really been done before. And that was part of selling the big story idea to all the tenants. So before we even really started in earnest on full-scale design, we had to advance a lot of our concept thinking, a lot of our early feasibility and early concept development, just to get the program. How many square feet, how many different buildings, how would we divide up retail, how would we divide up dining and entertainment zones. And that was our best guess in the beginning. And Matt, one thing that was a huge challenge was that constantly changed all the way through until maybe a year before opening. Actually, some restaurants and spaces were still being built and developed even after opening. And we would change that. So we would start with, Zara, I remember, started off, we were only, I think, 10,000 square feet, and they said we have to have 25,000 square feet. So we were just, I even took a fire escape staircase and took it out of the building and moved it outside. You can see that when you walk into the big brick a building, you can see staircase on the outside, and that was our Meisner stairs that we did in honor of Addison Meisner Architects. But anyway, so that was a big challenge, because with a theme park, with an attraction, you say, here's the attraction, here's the building, the ride system fits inside, the THRC is 1,200, you kind of know what that is, and then everybody sets about their business. Now, there's challenges and stuff. I'm not to say that there isn't, but you don't have the operator coming back saying, you know what, we actually wanted 2 attractions, and we really wanted 3 retail shops, and could you go ahead and put 5 restrooms in instead of the 2? And that's what Disney Springs was like all the way through the entire 4 years of that project.
That's crazy. That's incredible. It's such hard work. A very dynamic project, to say the least. So that's just a fascinating project timeline right there. It's amazing. Really amazing.
There's not a balder man in front of you today.
You managed the stress well. There are some pieces of Disney Springs, a lot of pieces, that are Disney spaces. And one of them that I definitely want to talk about is Jock Lindsay's. I find that is, it's a central piece in Disney Springs. It kind of is really in the center point of the full district, physically, geographically, maybe a little bit more towards like the Cirque du Soleil side, but it's just such a fun place to go. I walk in there every time I go just to see it, and I find that from even in the rafters above, the loft above, seeing Mara and the tie back to Indiana Jones, not Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of the Forbidden Eye in Disneyland. You can spend an hour in there and not see everything. Did you have any impact on Jock Lindsay's, or anything you could share about Jock Lindsay's, because it's such a fun place?
Yes, that was we had the distinct pleasure as a team, creative team specifically, starting this, but the whole team to develop, of course, and we got to build 5 brand new brands for the Disney company. The Ganachery is one of them, the chocolate shop. Amaret's Patisserie, Deluxe Burger, Jock Lindsay's Hanger Bar, and then we did a couple of really developed food carts, BB Wolf's and Daily Poutine. So those were all brands, everything, packaging, signage, menu items, everything. But by far the coolest was Jock's. I mean, it was so cool. And there's a really great story about how we got there, actually. So Jason Sorrell and I started the core idea of this, and we were developing basically a Jock character. But we didn't think that we could have permission to use Indiana Jones, right? Because at the time we didn't own the Lucasfilm franchise. Right. It was purchased afterwards. So we were kind of building this concept to build a character. I think we called him Nick Rivers or something, and it was sort of an adventure type character. And as we were pitching this idea, Tom Staggs was sitting, and remember Tom was the chairman of Parks and Resorts during this development, and Tom just kind of grabs his chin and he goes, well, why don't you make this Jock Lindsay's, based on the character? And literally Jason and I's mouth hit the floor because first of all, his nerd credit went through the ceiling, right? To even know Jock, who was only on camera for maybe a minute and a half.
Right. Very, very random character in the movie.
Right. And we looked at each other and we said, we can do that? And he goes, yeah, we can do that. So that's kind of how it started. And we just decided to put more Easter eggs than you'd find on Easter in that place. And we had a really, really good time with the Lucasfilm people. Like I said, at the time, there were no plans for Indiana Jones franchise like there are now. And we were wanting to push the Indy story beyond what had been developed, what was in canon. And so they were really amiable and really helped us to push a lot of that and to link Jock Lindsay specifically to a lot of real-world adventurers, right? Sir Edmund Hillary, and just all kinds of male and female adventurers from all over the world. And so that was a blast to be able to do that.
So cool. It's. Tom Staggs definitely gets nerd credit for sure for knowing that character.
I hope he's listening. That would be the coolest thing ever.
If he's listening, I'll be beside myself. Yes, that's amazing. But I mean, at that point, I could see you almost building. It's funny. I almost feel like in the way that it was done, Jock Lindsay feels like a member of the Society of Adventurers and Explorers and Adventurers, I should say, because it has such a Disney Sea tie to it. But I don't think it's formally part of that. We didn't formally make the link. We chose instead to make the link with the Adventurers Club to tie in. And in fact, we had this really fun, almost a whole day photo session where we brought back those performers from the Adventurers Club in their costumes and everything. We had a Jock character, we had an Indy character from the show, and we did this massive photo shoot so that all throughout Jocks, you'll see photographs like the opening day, the ribbon cutting. You'll have all of the characters there and everything. So that was a blast being able to tie into all that lore. That's amazing. I have to look for that photo. I'm sure I've seen it I don't think it connected when I saw that, but that is actually very cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of details that are really, really small, really tiny details. Like there's a dinosaur claw that's in, I can't remember if it's in Lost in, no, it's up by the bar. And that's a tie-in to Fred, who is the actor who played Jock Lindsay in the film. Fred's actually a real pilot. And,
wow.
Fred, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but Fred actually was hired by Steven Spielberg to be just a production pilot on Hawaii for the very first Jurassic Park. So if you remember in the film, there's a big hurricane coming. That was actually true. There was a real hurricane coming, and Spielberg pushed it as long as they could on the island to shoot it, to get all the great, trees and rain and all that stuff. Well, Fred's the one that took the last flight of the production crew out of Hawaii during the filming of Jurassic Park. So we put a dinosaur claw in there to kind of as an homage to Fred.
That's so cool. I'll have to. I didn't see that. I'll have to look out for it. That's really, really cool. I love all those little details that are there.
Man, we could talk a whole hour just on Jock.
I bet. Well, maybe we'll tap in and dive deep into Jacques Lindsay's in a future live for sure.
You know what we should do, Matt? You should come to Orlando and we'll broadcast one live from Jacques Lindsay's.
That idea I like. Have a drink in one hand, my phone in the other. We'll do in person Instagram live. That'll be cool. We'll talk after because I will be coming back actually pretty soon.
That would be really cool.
That would be amazing. Someone brought up as I'm looking through questions here, one of my favorite things about Disney Springs, and I know you've gotten this before, the parking. And besides the parking, it's also the transportation. I remember when it was Downtown Disney and I was a local and I was driving on a Friday night to Downtown Disney, I would spend, not kidding, 45 minutes to get to Downtown Disney's parking lot, just sitting in bumper to bumper traffic. And then to find a parking spot required circling and being aggressive. I remember having to actually people would fight for spots, and I'm not an aggressive person, so it's just about being strategic and making sure that I found the right person and had the right angle so no one could fight me on it and I can get that spot. I distinctly remember that. And then as soon as I first went to Disney Springs by car, and the simplicity of driving in from multiple places, from any direction, and then finding a parking spot, it has never... I wish every parking garage in America and across the world were like this, because it is just... And I know it exists elsewhere, but man, can you talk about the transportation and the parking? Because it's the part that always hassled me the most getting there and is now the easiest part of the experience.
Well, I would start by saying that one of the very first things that we do at Imagineering, and really good designers do this, is you think of the guest first, and you design and build the place that you're creating with story, with emotion, with heart, but also with function, and as frictionless as possible. So before we ever put pencil to paper to start the design or the creative process for Disney Springs, there was a lot of information that Walt Disney World had gathered from guests through lots of interviews and that kind of thing. And we took what we call verbatims. So it would be actual guest quotes, and those quotes became our design criteria. And one of those, actually, I can't say one because there were probably hundreds of verbatims that was related to parking, and so we just collected all of that and called it the arrival sequence. And that, as a design criteria, became almost a whole separate project. Expanded the highway. We created an entire busing lane. So we went from 3 lanes, Lake Buena Vista Drive, and we went to 5 lanes, and we had a dedicated 2-way bus traffic. We had a dedicated taxi lot. We had, valet drop off, and then we created these 2 giant garages, which are about the size of aircraft carriers. And then we actually have an exit ramp that goes right off of Interstate 4, which is our main corridor in Orlando. You exit right into Orange Garage. So that was so critical to our entire project because it's just what you said. Grumpy, frustrated, sweaty, rained on people. They don't like to shop, and a lot of people, especially the locals, I had locals tell me too, look, we just won't go. We'll go and go to the movie if we can get a parking space, but we're not going to go. We're just not going to go. It's not worth it. So we knew that we had to change that, and we knew we had to make it better. And not just better, but we wanted to set the standard. In fact, we got all of the pedestrian traffic, or maybe shouldn't say all. We got probably 95% of the pedestrian traffic off the street and into the garages and actually the big walkways, which we had to do for safety. We just didn't want guests crossing the road and So we did a lot of that kind of infrastructure to make it easier for guests. And as you say, that's the compliment I get most for Disney Springs. Not Jock Lindsay, not all the cool stuff that we did, but wow, I love the garages.
It makes a big difference. It's the part that, unless you knew the old downtown Disney and the experience there, you would just take it for granted. It's those little things that the frictionless points that you mentioned, when they are frictionless, you almost don't even notice the effort and the thought process that goes into it. But when there is friction, you definitely notice it. So seeing the shift, having the appreciation of going from a lot of friction and not thinking about, well, they should do something different, and maybe traditional thinking, just to add an extra lane each direction and make it easier. But no, let's totally reinvent how we're thinking about the whole arrival experience at this place and the infrastructure involved with that. Having the devoted bus lanes, like you mentioned, that's such a great critical point for the buses to easily get into and out of Disney Springs. Because I forgot, even as a local, I forgot that you're right. Even as on the buses going from, let's say, that Animal Kingdom Lodge, I want to go to Disney Springs. I'm still sitting in 45-minute traffic, but on the bus, so it's much better now.
There was such complication around traffic because we had to do, and we brought in a company that excels. That's what they do, is traffic, because you had guest traffic in rental cars, you had local traffic in their own cars, you had taxi traffic, you had Disney bus traffic, you had outside of Disney, like Mears or whatever, bus traffic, or Lynx is another city bus traffic. Then on top of all of that, you had deliveries. So all of those retail stores, all of the foods, everything required constant deliveries. You couldn't just say, don't deliver until 5. So we had to weave all of that traffic in a very, very strategic way to keep things flowing, to keep some of it behind the scenes that you don't see, and to keep it safe. And that alone was, there was, I don't want to talk too many numbers, but that was hundreds of millions of dollars just in the arrival sequence. That's how important that was. The company literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars and the full 4 years of design and construction to get all of that done.
Unbelievable. That's incredible. There's a lot that goes into these projects. Like you said, it's a lot of money invested in the beginning, and you don't even know. You have some sense when you're building something like this that you're going to get it back, but there's always so much capital thrown in the beginning, with the expectation that you'll get it back in the long run.
So much time spent on things like screening the garages. We knew that we didn't want to just do raw concrete structures. There are other amusement companies in the area that have done that, and none of us and the company didn't really like that look. So we wanted to do something different, and we thought it wasn't, obviously those structures are new. They weren't a part of the original village, original town, and in fact they blocked the view into Disney Springs from the road. So we had a big challenge in how to screen them, and what we came up with was sort of an urban art project that you see in a lot of downtown areas. And just a quick story on this, because this will actually illustrate to some of your viewers how, from a design perspective, we have to be able to change very, very quickly. We did a concept on how to screen the garages. It was a really cool kind of wavy metal pattern that started in the green colors, and then each ribbon band that was perforated got bluer and grayer as it went up. So it would have reduced the visual size of the garage, and because they were kind of like wave ribbons, it broke up the linearity, the geometry of it. So we pitched that. All of the bosses said, "Yep, great, go for it." So we got back. We told the contractor. The contractor bought all the material in aluminum, bought special machines to make the holes. They started working on it, all the engineering, right? So then, I don't know, the next month I was in California, did the update, brought in the more refined drawing and everything, and just had that on the board for all of my leaders, and was just updating. Here's what's going. Well, they looked at me and they said, "Oh, we don't like that. What's that?" And, they're your leaders, so you don't go, "Well, dummy, you told me, to do this." They said, "We don't like it." So quite literally, we had to redesign the entire screening on the garages, and those of you that have seen pictures or have been here know it is detailed. We changed that in 30 days and stayed with the engineering, with the existing contractor, and with all the machines that they specially bought to make the custom perfs, and we were able to do that, get approval, and completely re-engineer it in just 30 days. So sometimes you're stuck in those situations.
This is why we call you the geniuses at Imagineering, because you have to adapt to these situations real fast and think critically about how to navigate it. It's not always an easy sailing. It's usually not.
Right. That's when you realize. But that's when you realize that working 12 to 15 hour days is just a luxury, right? That there really are 24 hours in a day.
So true. Speaking of the garages, is one of the questions that came up here, which I think is very, it's specific, but it's interesting, is about the green parking garage, or the green plants on the parking garage, I should say. Are they real or artificial?
Oh, I'm so glad that you're asking. If you're asking, that means it's not obvious. We started with them as real because some of you may have heard me say this before. I was a real stickler on all the materials that we use at Disney Springs. I wanted real material. So almost all the wood you see, stone, all that stuff, it's all real shells. We started that way. In fact, we had the engineering for sprinkler systems and everything. But the horticulturalists, these are the experts with landscaping, they couldn't guarantee that the plants would stay alive. There were too many variables. They were in aluminum boxes, and they were concerned that the soil in the boxes would heat up in the sun. So we eventually decided to go with artificial, and we went with a really high-end artificial that was, color included and all that stuff. It's the same kind of stuff that is at Pandora, and the same kind of material that's on the Tree of Life. It's pretty high-end stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. And that was my guess. It's difficult to manage real plants like that for that type of space. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm getting a ton of questions about the NBA experience because this is relevant news. I know that I know you were definitely not involved with the decision to get rid of the NBA experience. But I guess, first of all, do you know anything about the decision to make it the NBA experience? And if you were to put your blue sky thinking cap on, how would you envision that space? Because it's a very big, it went from Disney Quest to NBA experience. I feel like there's a lot of potential use for that space.
Yeah, it's pretty much a brand new building. It was cheaper, which is crazy to me, but it was cheaper to demolish the building, the Disney Quest building, and rebuild it, because we actually did quite a lot of studies of using the existing structure and modifying it. But when you do that kind of thing, there's a lot of building codes that come into play with an older structure, and it ends up costing you more money. So I find it very sad, actually, devastatingly so, to spend that kind of money on a facility and only after 2 years it's closed. I haven't been with the company since last January, or December rather, so it obviously wasn't my decision.
Right.
And the project, the project team that built that particular venue, I wasn't a part of. But I did pitch, my team and I did pitch in the beginning to the company an ESPN concept that would celebrate all sports. And we did give them the idea that you could have spaces within the facility where you could highlight whatever sport the season, whatever sport that was highlighted in a particular season, whether it's Major League Baseball or basketball, football, or even things like Formula One or beach volleyball. We really wanted it a place where it was all sports all the time. And for a whole bunch of corporate reasons that are too boring to go into, and it had a lot to do with probably with licensing the right to broadcast NBA games, I think on ABC. And that's kind of the way that they went, which unfortunately, yeah. I hated the idea, but that's the way that they went.
It's very, you're right. It is corporate, and there's always, it's complex, I think is the reason for that. But I love the idea of if they can make it, and maybe they will, like expand it to an all sports all the time type of idea that would give it some diversity, and you can go and have a different experience whenever you go, different times of the year, even locals. It's like watching sports throughout the year. You can always get a different experience that way. So that would be very cool.
Well, just like if you're a homeowner, or actually if you own a vehicle, right? There's this idea of amateurization, right? So if you spent $500,000 on your home, there's an amateurization of how long it takes to pay that off, or in the case of a business like this, it takes years, decades for it to go off the books, right? So I only say that to say there's no way that in 2 years it paid for itself. So the
Right.
company will definitely be looking for another purpose for it. There is a restaurant attached to it, and I haven't heard if the restaurant's closed. I can't imagine it would be, because I believe it's ground floor, so that could be potentially run separate.
That could be. But yeah, I agree. And it's we like to think that Disney always makes all the right decisions, but you only get to good decisions by sometimes making bad decisions too, or having failures. And I mean, even Walt, we go back to Walt himself. He had plenty of failures, in addition to the many successes. But that's, yeah, especially when you have a large project, it is taking a loss. But the learnings will be there, which will be great, which does transition me into a question I wanted to ask, now that I'm thinking about it. And this came from, here we go. What was the biggest lesson you learned when creating Disney Springs?
Wow, biggest lesson I learned. I would have to say there were a lot. So the one I'll lean into creatively was I really personally felt like I had to reevaluate the way that I thought about designing and building a Disney experience. Now, keep in mind, for those who are viewing, my personal career, I had already spent 2 years in Paris and 4 years in Hong Kong before Disney Springs. So that idea of my baseline, if you will, of how to create stories and experiences for different cultures and different people, that had already been challenged, right? And I'd already learned a lot about how to adapt stories to different audiences so that those stories are relevant for those audiences. But Disney Springs was a different beast in itself, because we couldn't, I mean, as a creative executive, I couldn't lean on any of the elements that we use in a theme park, right? I couldn't use a hidden Mickey. I couldn't use concentric circles. I couldn't just use, red, black, and yellow, and then, somebody go, oh, those are Mickey colors. Or, I just, there was just, we couldn't use the characters. We, in fact, couldn't really use IP because we had so many tenants. And the entire process itself creatively was very different than an attraction or a theme park. The approach that we took was very, very different. The place itself, the materials, the architectural designs, all of those things had to speak for themselves. We couldn't put a plaque there that said, on this spot in 1905. We didn't want to do that. We wanted
Right.
the place itself to exude the story. So that was probably my biggest learning, and in fact, really is helpful now as I'm working for companies that are outside of themed entertainment. That kind of evaluation of applying stories and design to different brands, that was very, very helpful for me.
That's a great takeaway. Yeah, there's always something unique from different projects to learn, and I think that's an interesting one for this one. Wrapping up, are there any other fun stories or details that you love pointing out to people if you take them to Disney Springs that they might not know about or take for face value, or just like pass right by it and have no idea the big picture detail or the little detail that's involved?
Sure. I'll do 3 quick things. The first one's
Awesome.
really fun because we were talking about the hangar bar. There was I think it was called a great green heron, which is a bird. It's a protected bird, and it had a nest in a cypress tree on the site where Jock Lindsay's was going to go. We couldn't remove the tree because the animal was protected, so that delayed our project. I believe it was 2 months, maybe longer, from when we were supposed to start, because we were waiting for the baby heron to hatch and for them to fly away before we could cut down the tree. So that was really cool. The other thing is, I have been asked quite a lot before about hidden Mickeys. I mentioned it just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I'm probably one of the only Imagineers that I've heard from that really vehemently disagrees with using hidden Mickeys. I'm passionate about not using them. I like hidden Easter eggs. I really love hidden story points, because I feel like if guests discover something, a detail that they hadn't seen before, that detail should further the story of the venue that they're in, not tell a corporate story about the company that runs the venue that they're in. So that's kind of the difference that I see it. So the next time that you're at Disney Springs, when you're especially in the Landing neighborhood, now that's the old Pleasure Island where most of the restaurants are, look up on the buildings, because we have what we call terracotta sculpts, bas-relief sculpts, and those sculpts actually tell the story of the function of that island before it got turned into Disney Springs. Also, in front of Jock Lindsay's, there's a big brass compass rose inset in the brick pavers, and the north, south, east, west also has a vehicular representation of the 4 modes of travel that were all represented by the Landing. So that's really cool. Last detail about the Landing that very few people know about is all of the bricks that you'll see in the paving, what you walk in. Imagineering, our project team, purchased all of those bricks from a college, a university in downtown Orlando called Rollins College. It's very well known for their law degree and business degree. And it's in an old part, historic district. And when they expanded at the time that we were building Disney Springs, they actually removed some of the old brick streets to do their expansion. And they had enough forethought to save the bricks, and we bought all of them. We bought all the pallets of bricks. Now, here's the really cool thing. The company or the factory that made those bricks went out of business in 1927. So they were built prior to 1927 and laid in the ground prior to that. So it was perfect timing for the history of the Landing, which was founded and built in 1901. So all of those street bricks that were manufactured for that purpose are now used in the Landing as street bricks in the same time period. So again, very few people know that, but I just think that's the level of details in our storytelling that we went to.
That is authenticity. That is incredible. I can't even imagine thinking about that. Let's try to get bricks from the actual era about 100 years ago and the factory that would have made it. I mean, that is almost inconceivable for most companies to wrap their heads around, but that is such an authentic detail. That's thinking about that's honestly, like, even comparing it to such an authentic detail as Joe Rohde saying, let's buy out shops in Nepal and put them in the Expedition Everest queue. I mean, that's like taking it out to a time period that you can't even, that doesn't even almost, you can't get that type of material anymore. So that's amazing. I will be thinking about that every time I pass over those bricks now. Amazing. Well, Theron, I feel like for sure, next time I get to down to Disney Springs, we'll have to do an Instagram Live together, maybe show off some of that. If we do Jock Lindsay's, I am all for that, but we'll also have to share some of the details and do like a walk through Disney Springs and check some things out. But I want to make sure people know where to go to find you, because not only are you such an expert on what has been done in the past with Disney and what you've worked on, but you also help companies, you help individuals, people who are looking to get into a creative role. So where can people go to connect with you and absorb all this knowledge and apply it for themselves?
Great. Well, as I've mentioned before on previous Instagram Lives that we've had together, I really enjoy inspiring, educating, and guiding the next generation of themed experience designers. So on my Instagram page, you can find a Linktree link that connects to all of the different platforms where I share content: YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Facebook. I have a pretty large Facebook room Facebook group that we do a live room every other month. Website, I have courses, and then I also offer, which this is kind of unique in the industry, but I offer a coaching service to people as well. You can access that through my website. The Designers Creative Studio is the name of my company. And I've helped students, I've helped professionals, peers and C-suite executives talk about ways to revolutionize their businesses, to include story. I've talked to students about how to position their careers, their academic careers and their early careers to find entry points into the industry. And I've helped existing pros that are in the industry now, but maybe they want to move. Maybe they're a concept designer and they want to move into art direction, that kind of thing. And I really enjoy doing that. So that's just some of the ways that I'm out there, but I have a lot of different social sites, and people can find me in those locations. The designerscreativestudio.com is my website, and the link tree is on my Instagram page. Probably the two best ways.
Easy enough. So if you're listening to the podcast, it's going to be in the description of this episode. Just find the links there. If you're watching on Instagram now, after this is over, it's going to go up on IGTV, and maybe that's where you're watching it here. And I'll have Theron's Instagram handle there. So just click on that, go there, and you'll find all the links to all those places. So Theron, this is always a pleasure. Again, I always learn something new from talking with you, and I feel like, once again, half the things that you mentioned I did not know, and the other half I only know because we've talked about it before. So I appreciate it. This has been so much fun. Thanks everyone for watching as well. And Theron, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for being back on Instagram Live.
My pleasure. One of the coolest ideas out of this is that we're actually going to go to Jock Lindsay's, have a drink, and do live. I'm
looking forward to that so much.
That's game changing. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
and everybody have a great week.
Thanks. Same to you. Bye, everyone. And with that, we close out episode 119 of the Imagineer podcast. I want to give a very special thank you once again to Theron for coming onto the show once again to talk about incredible Imagineering details. I loved this conversation about Disney Springs. I know I will be visiting Disney Springs again and looking for all these incredible details that went into the inspiration and the execution of this shopping district at Walt Disney World. I, of course, want to turn this conversation over to you and hear what detail or story you enjoyed the most from this conversation. You can send me your answers and feedback in so many different ways. I would encourage you to follow Imagineer Podcast on social media. You can find Imagineer Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Imagineer Podcast, on Twitter at Imagineer News, and you can join our Facebook group, which is the Imagination, also called the Imagineer Podcast Disney Fan Community, to chat about this subject and all things Disney with me and with other members of this listener community. You can also send me an email if you want to send any direct feedback. If not through a direct message on social media, you can email me at matt@imagineerpodcast.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartMedia, Stitcher, Podbean, or any other podcast app, which will ensure that you are the first to know when new podcast episodes become available. And usually the episodes, depending on your settings, will even download straight to your phone so you can listen as soon as the episode becomes available. And if you have a few moments to leave us a rating and a review in the Apple Podcast Store in particular, that goes a long way to help this community out. It lets others know what they can expect if they come across Imagineer Podcast in a search or find it on social media. And I do read each and every review that I get. I'll often share them out on my Facebook or Instagram stories, and I'm so grateful to those of you who have left a rating and a review in the past. But perhaps the best thing you could do for the show is a very simple thing. and that's to hit that share button. Whether you share out this podcast episode or the podcast as a whole or any other podcast episode or even a post on social media, that goes a long way to help this community out and helps us to get even more optimists and family-friendly Disney fans into our community. You can also simply, of course, just talk about Imagineer Podcast with your family and friends who love all things Disney, and it goes a long way again to help this community out. And if you would like to take your love of Imagineer Podcast to the next level, I would encourage you to check out our Patreon group over at patreon.com/Imagineer Podcast. I have a link to that destination in the show notes of this episode and at ImagineerPodcast.com. But that's a way you can help to support the show financially, and at all levels of support, you get benefits, perks, and rewards that are available exclusively to our what we call Imagination Pass Holder community, our Patreon members. And those include things like access to a private Facebook group. We do weekly Disney Plus watch parties, as well as private virtual events just for members of this community. Early access to every podcast episode, bonus podcast episodes, daily content that's posted to our Patreon group, and so much more. You can see what perks and rewards are currently available, because they are subject to change, by, again, heading to patreon.com/Imagineer Podcast. And thanks as always to our incredible Patreon community. I would also encourage you to check out our partners. First, take a look at The Kingdom Insider over at thekingdominsider.com and The Kingdom Insider on all social media channels to get the latest news about what's happening at the Disney parks and resorts. They have a really great way of sharing the latest Disney news because they confirm the Disney news, which I appreciate, by either looking for official announcements that come directly from Disney or by reaching out to Disney representatives to confirm what information is true, which helps to sift through all the information that's online about Disney these days. So you can check them out again by heading to thekingdominsider.com or simply follow The Kingdom Insider on your favorite social media channel. And the next time you're ready to book a vacation to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise Line, Adventures by Disney, Aulani, or any other Disney destination, check out our travel partner, Academy Travel. They are a diamond earmarked agency, which is the highest level of distinction that Disney awards travel agencies. They've been in this business for over 25 years and can offer an incredible amount of service in helping to plan out your next Disney vacation, which is great because not only do they have the experience and the service to make the most or help you to make the most of your next Disney vacation, but it comes at no additional cost to you, which is such a great benefit. You can learn more and request a free quote for your next Disney vacation by clicking on the links in the show notes below or by heading to ImagineerPodcast.com, clicking on the travel dropdown and selecting your destination. Last but not least, I want to encourage you, as always, to go after your hopes, your dreams, your goals, whatever they might be. I'll also add that having a positive mindset and an optimistic point of view really goes a long way, not just in helping you to accomplish your dreams, but in making a better life for yourself. It goes a long way because the right attitude really makes the difference, all the difference in your life, and can really help you to bring your dreams to reality. So remember to stay optimistic, stay positive, and remember, as always, that inspiring quote from Horizons: if you can dream it, you can do it. Thank you so much for listening to the show, and we'll see you again in a future episode of the Imagineer Podcast.
Come on, everybody, here we go!